it's Alex, and I'm back from a little bit of a break I had from YouTube, and I thought today's video would be fun if we discussed the MacBook Air 2020 model versus the iPad Pro. So I've had a lot of comments about whether or not it's a good idea to get a MacBook Air or to get an iPad Pro, and if you're not in the market for a MacBook Pro right now, and you want something a little bit more cheaper around the $1,000 price range, I think these are two great options from Apple right now. So let's discuss and go into which one would be more suited for you. As we all know, the MacBook Air isn't the flashiest laptop. It doesn't have all the bells and whistles. It's not the MacBook Pro. You don't have a touch bar, and you don't have that insane performance you can get on a MacBook Pro. So it starts at $999 for the base model, which is now 256 gigs, up from 128, which is pretty ridiculous that 2019, we had a MacBook that came on the base model with 128 gigabytes of storage. Yeah, most definitely, most people were using external hard drives on that because I don't see how you could actually daily operate with a hard drive that small, but Apple fixed it. We have 256 on it, so it's gonna be a little bit more bearable now. Now on the iPad Pro side of things, pricing is within the same bracket. You can get yourself a 256 gigabyte 11-inch iPad Pro for $899, or you can opt with the larger 12.9 for $1,100. If you add accessories like a Magic Keyboard or any third-party keyboard, you're gonna drive the price up several $100s, so keep that in mind. But for today, we're just gonna be doing a general comparison between the iPad Pro and the MacBook Air. Now, there's a lot of different variables that are gonna fluctuate between the two. However, depending on personal preference, it's going to be up to you. So let's start off with design first. The iPad Pro is a tablet. It's not a notebook. It's about 1.5 pounds, so it's really light and super thin, and it's actually about 1 pound on the 11-inch model. And the MacBook Air is about 3 pounds, and it's also thin and portable. So for backpacks or carrying it around in general, you're gonna have freedom with both options. However, the iPad Pro can be used in portrait mode, but you'll be missing the true laptop experience of throwing it on your lap and typing unless you get like a keyboard. The new MacBook Air does have scissor switches again, so it feels really awesome to type, and especially when you compare it to the butterfly switches, which didn't have any key travel and were pretty horrendous. Now, when it comes to the iPad Pro, it does have an on-screen touch keyboard, but I'm gonna be honest with you, if you're gonna do any serious work, I definitely recommend looking into something like a Magic Keyboard or any third-party keyboard. Let's talk about security and login features. So the iPad Pro is using Face ID and the MacBook Air is using Touch ID. Both are equally as snappy in terms of logging in, but now with everyone wearing masks all the time, I found that Touch ID or a fingerprint sensor is gonna be ultimately better suited for a quick unlock. Sometimes Face ID can have trouble with masks. Apple's getting updates out, like iPadOS 13.5 is supposed to fix this issue with Face ID. I haven't tried it, but just be aware. I would love to see Face ID on the MacBooks in the future. Having it on the iPad Pro and the iPhones is awesome. The true depth front-facing camera on the iPad Pro is better than the potato quality camera on the MacBook Air. The front-facing camera on the MacBook Air is 720p, and Apple still considers it HD, but it's pretty garbage. And the iPad Pro does come with a rear-facing 12-megapixel camera and a 1080p selfie camera, which supports things like portrait mode and emojis, and it's overall better for video chat in general. You also have a LiDAR scanner on the 2020 model that supports augmented reality scans. Now, I covered this in my full iPad Pro 2020 review if you're interested in it, so go ahead and check that out. I have it linked up above or somewhere in the description. Anyways, Touch ID is still fast, like to the point where I wouldn't mind having either Touch ID or Face ID when it comes to logins. But speakers is a different story. The iPad Pro has great side-firing speakers. However, the MacBook Air speakers are positioned in a way where the sound can be fired directly at you, and they're also noticeably louder. So, comparing the displays, the bezels are both similar. However, the MacBook Air does have a little bit wider chins, nothing really noticeable, but what is noticeable is the displays between the two. Now, hands down, the iPad Pro display is better. You have P3 wide color gamut compared to the standard sRGB, and you'll notice it's sharper, brighter, and it's also a touchscreen that has ProMotion. So you're getting 120 Hz refresh rate versus the static 60, and that's really noticeable. The trackpad on the MacBook Air is fairly large and force sensitive, so multi-touch was always nailed and palm rejection was excellent. On the iPad Pro, all the inputs are really buttery and smooth, and now that there's native mouse support, it's less like a tablet in terms of interface. I've talked about this before, it's a hybrid snap cursor that works really well, surprisingly, and you do have Apple Pencil support too. So this is gonna be great for artists, note takers, video editors, or anyone that needs a precise input. So anytime I talk about the iPad Pro, I always feel like I have to mention how far it's come in terms of updates and usability. Now, iPadOS has made this more of a competitor to macOS, but it's still not for everyone. And what I mean by that is programs like Xcode, Cinema 4D, After Effects. There's a lot of programs that just aren't there yet on iPadOS and are just gonna work natively on a laptop. So for programmers, a Mac is probably gonna be a better choice. When it comes to thermals, the iPad Pro does run cool, unlike the MacBook Air, but I think it's been thrown out of proportion. It does run hot, like upwards of 90 degrees Celsius on basic tasks. It's not thermal throttling or overheating. It's designed to run hot. It's just something to keep in mind. Compatibility is slowly on the rise for the iPad Pro, so programs like Logic Pro actually just got support for the iPad Pro. So I think as we see this tablet age more and more, we're gonna see more major programs start getting ported over or have their own versions on the iPad Pro. Let's talk about ports now. You have 2 Thunderbolt 3 ports and a headphone jack on the MacBook Air. And on the iPad Pro, you have 1 USB-C port. The Files app has gotten better on the iPad Pro, but you're gonna get more file management flexibility on something like a MacBook Air that runs full-fledged macOS. And finally, when it comes to speed and smoothness, the iPad Pro is going to take the crown here. The A12Z on the 2020 model and the A12X on the 2018 model still hold up and is really fast. Now, the base model of the MacBook Air has good performance, but ultimately the flexibility you get with the iPad Pro is incredible. It's a really fun device to use. The base model MacBook Air has good performance. Now, is it going to be insane performance? Are you going to be able to do intensive tasks? No. It's an i3 processor, and I'd probably recommend getting the i5, so it's going to boost up another $100 to the price, but you can get some student discounts on it. So I think this laptop is a great choice for people that want to do basic tasks or students that want it for schoolwork. Now, if you're not into the whole tablet experience, I recommend the MacBook Air. But if you do want a really adaptable and unique device, the iPad Pro is a really good device to look at. I believe in the iPad Pro. I think when Apple continues to iron out the little things with the iPad Pro, it's going to be the device to beat. So ultimately, the decision is up to you. I hope this kind of helped you out in making a decision if you want to get a MacBook Air or an iPad Pro, or if you're just interested about the two. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll catch you guys in the next one. See ya.